that was an unbelievable call. Nobody made that call. It's because you had the cojones to make the bad calls too. But I don't think none of us think the bad calls are actually bad calls when we make them, and I don't think that with Tony right now.
Completely agree.
I'm really happy that Matt pronounced cojones correctly. After Dave, you dropped a cojones.
Cojones, yeah, that's
Come on, man. La palabra es cojones. Week 2 of the NFL season is already here, and we are going to be jumping into our starts of the week. Guys, week 1 was absolutely nuts. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of that regression to the mean, maybe some teams that are bouncing back to normal, but we also might start to see some really scary trends from some of these offenses. I know fantasy managers are worried. Who are we starting? Week 1, set a lot of panic alarms off. And there are some questions. There's some obvious players out there that we're going to start, but there's some less obvious ones. And we're going to jump into those today. Let's get right to it. Dave, at the quarterback position, you are willing to take a chance on Daniel Jones.
Yeah,
talk to me about Daniel Jones.
Famous last words. It can't possibly get any worse, right? But really, I don't think it can get any worse than what we saw this weekend or last weekend. That was just absolutely terrible on Sunday night. And he's going up against Arizona. And Arizona's defense is not good. I mean, they just allowed 200-plus passing yards and a passing touchdown to Sam Howell in his first career NFL start. They gave up the 8th most points to quarterbacks last year. And Daniel Jones was QB9. I mean, we talked about it. I don't usually write off a game or a bad performance for weather, but it looked like he was getting sprayed with a fire hose out there on Sunday night. It was just a brutal game to watch. I think he was completely underprepared for that smothering Dallas pass rush. So I think he can get right this week. We know that his rushing floor is going to be pretty alluring, and he's also got the upside as well. There are some concerns that Darren Waller might not play this week, but I still think that Daniel Jones is a guy who last year was QB9 without Darren Waller, is still somebody that you can confidently put back in your lineup this week if you're looking at those streaming QB options. So I'm willing to throw away last week, give him a fresh start, and plug him back into my lineup in week 2.
Yeah, Dave, good point you make there is that he was QB9 without Darren Waller last year, without much of anything. And I think that's where the fear is. People say if he doesn't play, who is he going to be throwing to? That offense looked really bad. So I like that you're taking a stance there. Matt, you've got another quarterback that I think some people might say this is an obvious one. Others are actually starting to panic on this player for a lot of the same reasons as Daniel Jones. You've got Justin Fields as your quarterback start of the week.
Yeah, I mean, look, he was quarterback 12 last week in what was a disaster, and all the critics, some of them are good critics like JT O'Sullivan and his QB school. I saw a little clip of him just literally with an expletive filled tirade about what the offense was doing in the red zone. And, there are a lot of people who look at Fields, and from the time he was a college prospect, they just feel like that he is not a classic NFL quarterback who's going to be evolving into a franchise caliber passer. And I think a lot of that's bunk. It's still growing pains for him because he's had multiple offenses in Chicago. They're still trying to get, they've got an influx of new players that they've rotated through. It's a young offense still. So there's a lot of adjustments to be made. But through all of that, he was still quarterback 12 last week. Okay. And he's facing a Buccaneers offense that gave up a lot of points to Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. And I look at, the Buccaneers have a pass rush. They have some speedy guys, but not speedy enough to contain Justin Fields on the ground with his legs. And Justin Fields said, look, I didn't take as many chances last week. I should have trusted some of my downfield receivers more, and mainly DJ Moore and, like it or not, Chase Claypool. But I would say DJ Moore is really the answer there. And we're going to see Justin Fields air it out a little bit better. And he's always been good at airing the ball out. I think he's a good deep ball thrower overall, whether the stats say that right now or not in terms of the early returns. So I feel very good about Justin Fields giving you at least low-end starter production, and I think you're going to see a lot more than that.
I'm glad you brought that up, Matt, because I've been getting a ton of DMs from people like, why did you tell me to draft Justin Fields? This dude sucks, blah, 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 blah. And I think you nailed it. Like, he was still a starting quarterback last week in fantasy, and there's a big chasm between real life quarterback play and fantasy quarterback play, and his rushing upside still makes him a guy that you want to start every single week. I'm kind of looking at last week as at his floor, 55 yards, 55 yards, or what, 59 yards rushing, sorry, one passing touchdown. That's kind of the worst case scenario from Justin Fields. He's only going to get better from here. So thanks for bringing that up, Matt, because I agree. You're starting Justin Fields again this week.
Yeah, because, I mean, if you had we'll just say really quickly, I mean, there are a lot of other quarterbacks in this league that if they were under center for the Chicago Bears in that game, wouldn't have been quarterback 24.
Right.
So the fact that he was quarterback 12, that gives you a good example of, how compelling Fields is and how he will be as the season progresses.
I just love that Dave's already getting angry DMs week 2. You're in mid-season form, and I love it, Dave.
I mean, I was getting them after week 1 after the Kadarius Toney recommendation, so I'm no stranger to angry DMs. Just bring them on.
All right, so I'm going to finish this off here at the quarterback position. I'm going with Jared Goff versus the Seattle Seahawks, and Jared Goff has quietly just been really good over nearly the last, 18 games, it looks like, when you start to look at the numbers, and I think he can be a top 12 guy this week. Both teams have below average secondaries. I think that's going to lend to a bit more passing, a bit more scoring than we might think. We just saw Matt Stafford go off for 334 passing yards with no shade, because I know he's the golden boy right now, but Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell and a bunch of guys that I don't think any of us would have thought were in the same realm as Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we look at this game being at home for Jared Goff. Last 9 home games, he's averaged 275 passing yards, over 2.5 touchdowns, averaging approximately 26 fantasy points per game at home. And Jared Goff, 0 interceptions in his last 10 games as a starting quarterback. It seems like a guy that's going to be safe, but also give you that upside at home against the Seattle Seahawks. Now, we're going to get to the running back starts of the week in just a moment. But before we do, if you're enjoying this, right, we're what, 5 minutes in, 6 minutes in, give this video a like. Okay, smash that like button. Make sure you are subscribed. I had to say smash the like button. That's what every content creator says.
Cringe so hard, Alfredo.
I know. I read the handbook. But make sure you are subscribed to the Football Guys YouTube channel. We have so many great shows, tons of great content here, from this Football Guys Fantasy Football show to the Audible, to the Dynasty show, the DFS show, the Sunday morning live start sit. We've got so many great things. And we've got the Audible live Thursday night football tonight on Twitter or X, whatever the kids are calling it nowadays, with our very own Matt Waldman and Jeff Bell hosting that. So please make sure you're subscribed here. Drop a comment down below. Yeah.
Can we give a subscriber someone a free subscription if they send us a video of them doing a roundhouse kick to get a like on their screen? Because instead of smashing,
we're probably gonna have to. We're gonna have to send them a new computer, probably, if they do that.
But
I think it's worth a free subscription.
I think it's worth a free subscription at that point, right?
I think Joe would allow it.
Yeah,
I like it. Let's send that request to Joe right away. Yeah. All right, guys. Let's get to the running back starts of the week. Dave, you're going with a guy that I think just continues to surprise people. And at this point, I feel like he should be a no-brainer, but there are going to be a lot of questions about Brian Robinson, Commanders running back.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos did a pretty good job of bottling up the run against the Raiders last week, but I'm chalking a lot of that up to Josh Jacobs missing the majority of camp, and he just didn't really look like himself last week. So what I'm doing when I'm starting Brian Robinson is just betting on the workload here. He saw 19 carries and 2 targets to Antonio Gibson's 3 carries and 1 target. I mean, he seems to be the guy. Like, this is the closest thing we're getting in today's NFL to a true workhorse in the league. And he looks a lot better this year. I mean, last year, I think we can chalk up some of the bad, nerdy efficiency metrics to maybe the fact that he got shot right before the season started. I mean, maybe, just maybe, that is why he wasn't the most efficient running back. He looks much better this year. So I am A-okay just riding Brian Robinson as an RB2 just about every single week, and he falls right alongside the other guy I'm going to recommend as a start of the week. But I'm starting Brian Robinson ahead of Raheem Mostert against New England. I know he's on the injury report right now, so maybe we get some more word on that. Starting him ahead of Javonte Williams, starting him ahead of James Conner, starting him ahead of Jamal Williams as well. So Brian Robinson fits in as a top 20 running back for me this week.
By the way, really quick, you mentioned Raheem Mostert on the injury report. Just to give that some context, I'm a Dolphins fan, so I'm seeing all the notifications. It was just a veteran rest.
A veteran day off.
Yeah. It's just his injury was just being old, so he's fine. He'll be playing this week. Matt, let's get to yours. I like this just for the name alone, but I really want to hear why fantasy managers need to be starting Justice Hill in week 2.
Well, I kind of viewed this as I wanted to pick some challenging guys for like, for people who might be already in a bad position week 1. This is how I kind of looked at this was
There's a lot of
like,
us.
who are some guys to take some chances on that if you're in a desperate situation. Okay. Because I would joke, if you were Miami, I would have said, well, Eric Uzukama might have the Debo Samuel role for the next few weeks,
Yeah, he does.
But Justice Hill, look at it this way. The Colts have a pretty good defense. They did give up a big run to a speedy back in Travis Etienne last week. And that was probably a good bit of the rushing yards that they allowed. But again, they were trying to stop, they were dealing with a team that also, throws the ball very well. And we're trying to stop a lot of those guys and a lot of their, their defensive investment was on the back end of that, of the back half of the defense in the secondary. So when you look at the Baltimore Ravens, it's kind of the same thing now with J.K. Dobbins out. They're not the Colts are going to try and stop Lamar Jackson. They're going to try and stop the passing game. They're not going to worry as much about Justice Hill. Justice Hill is going to get that Kyron Williams light boxes opportunity to shine. And so as a result of that, he's going to even get more touches than Kyron will. He'll get some touches maybe in the passing game as well. And he saw even last week that he got some opportunities in the red zone. So I think Justice Hill is in that situation where you could see a breakaway run that gets him over 100 yards, scores maybe 2 touchdowns as a result of one maybe, in the green zone inside the 5-yard line, and then maybe one as a big play out of either as a short pass turned into a long gain or a breakaway run against a light box.
Yeah, I got a league with Cooper Kupp, Christian Watson, Deontay Johnson. So you talk about some of these people getting desperate early in the season. I am desperate enough that Justice Hill is in my starting lineup this week. So hope you're right on that one, Matt, because I am starting him.
There you go. Good luck.
Well, I mean, the way you look at it, right, and some of these names that we're going to bring up, one of the guys I'll bring up later, it's if you have this player on your roster and you got Justice Hill off waivers, it's because you probably have a hole at running back and you probably need to start him anyway. So this is that little push you need to make sure that he's in your lineup. I'm going to finish us off here I'm going to give you my first running back start, and it is James Cook going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that maybe the people who were very high on James Cook before the season were a little disappointed after week 1, but I think you can say that about basically every single part of the Buffalo Bills offense that's not named Stephon Diggs after week 1. It was a very wild, wild west kind of game for Josh Allen. I keep saying this. He's like a 6-year-old running around just after eating a bunch of sugar and just like didn't quite reel it in to play a football game. He just looked like any one of my friends trying to play football on a Saturday morning, and it did not look great. But James Cook, he had the usage in week 1, the usage that I think a lot of us were questioning. Nearly 70% of the rush attempts. He was second on the team in targets. And we can't also discount the fact that Jets defense really, really good. Now they're going up against the Raiders defense. It should be easier sledding. And I was actually pretty surprised how often Josh Allen was looking James Cook's way. And I think that's something that Dave, you and I had talked about is like with these running quarterbacks, you don't typically find them checking down to these running backs, but Josh Allen was still doing both. He was still running plenty like a madman and still looking for James Cook. It was kind of like James Cook. It really looks like it's Stephon Diggs, James Cook, and Dalton Kincaid are the guys that are kind of the main receiving outlets for him over and over and over. So I was surprised about that. I do think Buffalo reels Josh Allen in a little bit. I think he's going to try to get those easy passes underneath to James Cook. And we saw last week, the Broncos running attack and specifically Samaje Perine looked pretty good. They led up plenty of receptions to the Broncos backfield. So I think James Cook is a smash start this week. Dave, you've got a name here that was awesome in week 1. And a lot of people have asked, can this guy be a starter throughout the season? Should I be picking him up on waivers? If you picked him up on waivers, once again, it likely means you're starting him. So talk to me about Tyler Algier.
Yeah, he was my waiver wire pickup of the week. I was saying that this is a guy that I was comfortable, splashing a little bit of fab on early in the offseason. And if you got him, I think you plug him in immediately as an RB2. He fits into my top 20 right ahead of Brian Robinson, who I just talked about. I mean, he outtouched Bijan in week 1. Now, I don't think that trend is going to continue, that he's going to keep outtouching Bijan Robinson, But this is a team that is going to flow their touches through the running backs. 35 of the opportunities went to running backs, 5 went to wide receivers, and 3 went to tight ends. That just blows my mind. This team had 43 offensive opportunities, and 35 of those 43 went to the running backs. So Bijan Robinson is obviously a no-brainer starting option. I don't have to tell you to start Bijan Robinson, but I think you could feel pretty confident plugging Tyler Algier in as your RB2 or your flex option. Last week, this defense gave up 80 yards on running back screens. So even though they do have, Green Bay, they looked pretty good against the run last week. They gave up a ton in running back screens, and we know that Arthur Smith is going to manufacture touches to get the ball in Tyler Algier's hands, to get the ball in Bijan Robinson's hands. And last year, this team allowed 22.4 points to running backs, which was 8th most in the NFL. So even though they've improved a little bit, I don't think that we really saw Bears run game gelling last week. I think that they can be a little bit better or a little bit worse than what we saw last week. So again, starting them ahead of the same guys, Raheem Mostert, Javonte Williams, James Conner, Jamal Williams, and Brian Robinson, who I just briefly talked about. Really, really like Tyler Algier this week and hopefully for the rest of the season.
I think we heard that Matt's dog definitely either agrees or disagrees. There's
He
strong
likes
opinion.
running backs. He likes
Good.
running backs.
How does he feel about Algier?
He liked Algier. He likes
All right.
those guys.
Good.
Good. I wasn't sure what it was.
Over. Yeah. Now don't mention the quarterback though. We spend he started hacking up along when I talked about him in the last podcast.
Got it. Strong opinions here. Matt, let's get to your running back start of the week. And I assume this one is going to be pretty contingent on the health of Aaron Jones. Or maybe there might be a bit more here. So talk to me about A.J. Dillon being one of your running back starts of the week.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that with Aaron Jones having a bum hamstring and probably, especially late in the game, pulling up the way that he did, that it may be a situation where you're going to see a lot more A.J. Dillon this week against Atlanta. I also think that they're going to be ahead probably in this game of, pretty quickly. If the passing game clicks the manner that it did against the Bears. And if that happens, then you're looking at probably closeout scripts with A.J. Dillon as the runner. And while Dillon didn't look great in the box score, he looked just fine on film. He had a couple of big losses that really weren't his fault. They were basically just poor blocking up front. And the runs where he had decent blocking, he did exactly what you would expect A.J. Dillon to do, or more so if you're not a big A.J. Dillon fan. And he can catch the ball. He can do everything you're looking for from him. And you look at Atlanta last week, they faced Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, who combined for 27 rushes for over 135 yards, or 132 yards, excuse me. And they also added another, 6 receptions for 35 yards combined. So, if Dillon gets the majority of the workload, and I would shut down Aaron Jones pretty quickly if we get ahead early, and if I'm starting him at all. And I think that that's one of those things that they may test it early, and then also find that maybe we just stick with Dillon. That's why we've got these two backs. So, yeah, I feel good about it because Atlanta, looking at that passing game that they had, they're very conservative. It's not going to get better, if you ask me, unless they have a new quarterback or they change the philosophy of what the coaching staff is doing right now. And I think the coaching staff is doing this because they don't have a quarterback who reads the field extremely well. So as a result of that, it is what it is. And that means that they got to stop Jordan Love to stay in this game. And I don't think Jordan Love and Bryce Young are synonymous at this point. Maybe in 4 or 5 years, but not right now. So count on A.J. Dillon to be closing things out.
Matt, and I want to ask you because, I mean, there was some praise there for A.J. Dillon, but it seems like there's also a little bit of fear with Aaron Jones. If Aaron Jones is declared active for this game, are you starting Aaron Jones in your fantasy lineup, or is there still that fear?
I think that it's one of those situations that if I have a good running back 3 in a 2 running back league, I would probably early in the season, I would play with the idea of sitting him, at this stage, because I'm not really worried about the first 4 weeks of the season. I've won enough to going 0-4, 1-5. It's not what I want to do, but I'll take some chances here and there. And if I have a good matchup elsewhere, I'll go with that good matchup, knowing that A.J. Dillon's just sitting right there, and the coaches are, if it were, let's put it another way for it. If it were Josh Jacobs with a bum hamstring in Josh McDaniels' offense, where we like Zamir White maybe, but we know he's going to get paired with a couple other backs and they're going to rotate it in and out. I would probably roll with Josh Jacobs, knowing that they're probably going to stick with him as long as they can. Whereas with this situation in Green Bay, Dylan's sitting right there, and they're looking at him and going, "Well, of course we can roll with him."
Yeah.
So, that's the difference.
Those game time decision hamstrings, oh man, those are the worst. They just put a pit in your stomach because we've all seen it so many times where you start the guy, he gets the start, and then 2 or 3 carries or 2 or 3 routes into the game, he pulls up lame and hits the bench, and then you're just staring at a donut for the rest of the weekend.
You guys were growing up probably when you saw this player, but just because I'm representing the Graybeard set today, Chris Brown, the former Tennessee Titans,
Titans,
back.
yep.
Yeah, he'd author one big run and then he'd pull a hamstring or sprain an ankle, and you'd get like 3 for 79 yards and a touchdown, and then you go like, what could have been,
in the first quarter.
He was that player represented in my era of that time.
Well, let's get to the final running back start of the week here in week 2, and I know this is gross, and I guess y'all can get your tomatoes ready for me, but I'm going with Zach Moss going up against the Houston Texans this week. And if he's active and this is what we talked about with all these other guys, if he was a big time waiver wire claim this week, if you got him off waivers, it's likely because you need a running back. And I'm not highly advocating for him as a running back 2 this week, but I do think that he is a very high upside running back 3. I think he's a solid flex play, especially going up against Houston here. The running back position overall is just looking messy. There's not a lot of secure guys with volume, so I do like the fact that I think Zach Moss can take over this backfield. Deion Jackson got a lot of work last week, 3rd most touches of any running back in the league, and he was, to put it kindly, awful. 13 carries for 14 yards. I don't know that we're going to see too much of a committee either because Evan Hull is also out. So if Zach Moss is active, I think he takes over this primary running back role in the Colts offense. And we saw, like we talked about with Anthony Richardson and the Colts earlier in the week, that offense looks a little bit better than we thought. I think they're going to be more competitive than many people thought. And that running game, this defense is probably going to be keying in on Anthony Richardson and more worried about him, that they may not be putting too much stock into stopping the run this week. So if Zach Moss can get the touches like he did last year as a starter, he was pretty good. 18 touches, 86 yards on average. And there's always that chance for the touchdown with how much better this Colts offense is. So I do think that there's going to be a close game script here going up against the Texans, and I do think he is worth a start as a running back 3 or a flex this week.
My only fear would be Deion Jackson. He looked terrible as a rusher, but he did look okay in his passing opportunities. So that would kind of be my fear, is that maybe Zach Moss gets all the early down work, and if they end up with goal line work that doesn't go to Anthony Richardson, maybe Zach Moss could get that. But my fear is that he could be one of those, 15 touch guys that's only getting carries between the tackles, where Deion Jackson gets the passing down work. But I'm with you. Deion Jackson really doesn't deserve to be an early down back after what we saw last week. So again, I'm desperate in some of these lineups with a lot of guys injured. Now I've got Zach Moss in my flex spot in quite a few leagues this weekend.
That's what I think it is, man. Like it's not a heavy, I'm not being a heavy advocate here for Zach Moss as some incredible talent that, thank God, he's finally getting touches. It's more so the running back landscape just stinks right now. And if you have him on your roster, it's because the running back landscape on your roster stinks too. And it's giving people that gentle nudge. It's okay to start this week.
So how would you react to the idea that they sign someone, say short term, like Darrell Henderson, who worked out this week, or they decide that there's talks that they're having talks with Fournette and Kareem Hunt. So if they sign this week, do you still roll with Moss at that point, and why? And if you don't, why not?
I think if they sign a vet, I'm just completely hands off that backfield. If it's going to be a committee between Zach Moss, Kareem Hunt, and Deion Jackson, I wouldn't be confident enough to plant a flag on any of those guys.
Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is I do think that if they sign a veteran, I think that speaks more to the health of Evan Hull, and I think that speaks to the potential future of Jonathan Taylor. But I think that there is a lot of truth to what Dave is saying. I don't think that necessarily means that one of those guys is going to be the unequivocal running back 1 on that team. I just think that it's going to be a bit more of a committee than we thought it was, and I think it becomes more concerns about Deion Jackson not really showing up well in week 1 either.
And I think to your point, what I would recommend to people for this week is that if that happens, I would still be starting Zach Moss if I had to start Zach Moss, because the 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 players still have to get up to speed and get into game shape to play. So they're only going to get limited opportunities. They'll get limited touches at best. And if it's Darrell Henderson opposed to Hunt or Fournette, then it's really about a reserve option who can come in case of an emergency, and they can tell them what the play is in the moment in the huddle, and then hand them the ball if they need to. Whereas with Hunt and Fournette, that's more of a long-term answer and not just this week.
I do like that at this point we're just combining Kareem Hunt and Leonard Fournette like as just this all-in-one encompassing
Kareem
free
Fournette,
agent.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
Kareem
just going to ruin
Darrell. Yeah, Kareem Darrell Fournette.
all of them. We got to find a way to mesh those. All right, before we move on here to talk about our wide receiver starts of the week, I want to let you know about Sleeper. It's the fastest organically growing fantasy platform in the entire world. That's right. I said it, the world. It's got over 5 million active users, and now they have this really cool feature called Sleeper Picks. Okay, it is a real money product that lets you choose 2 to 8 of your favorite players from pregame, live, even across various sports and leagues. So you're able to pick either more or less than the given stat that's in front of you. Do you think Christian McCaffrey is going to go over his rushing yards for this week? Go ahead and hit the over. And then when you do that, Sleeper is the only platform out there that's going to give you up to 100 times payouts. You can share it with your friends, get rewarded together. Head on over to sleeper.com/promo/FBG. Link is in the description down below. Dave, we're going to our wide receiver starts of the week, and I applaud your bravery, and I kind of like it because I think this is a good one. And I think there are a lot of people with questions about DJ Moore and the Bears passing offense going into week 2.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes hand in hand with what Matt was saying earlier in the show about, just starting Justin Fields. It was a bad week 1. There's no way around it. But like the one drive that looked really good for the Bears in week 1 was when they targeted DJ Moore twice. And it's like, finally, this offense remembered they got DJ Moore. And then they didn't target DJ Moore for the rest of the game, and they stunk. It was just a really head-scratching game all around. You got to think that a priority this week is going to be getting things right, and by doing so, getting the ball in their best receivers' hands. Now, kind of hesitant to make this comparison because it was obviously with a different team, but over the last 4 years, DJ Moore has faced off against the Buccaneers 8 times, and he has had 10 plus targets in 7 of those 8 games, averaging 10.8 targets per game, 6.6 receptions per game, 88 yards, and 17.7 fantasy points per game. I mean, over the last 4 years, in 8 matchups, he has been a wide receiver 1 when facing up against the Bucs. It could be tough sledding for the run game. I still think Fields is good enough that he'll be able to bounce outside and do his thing, but Devin White and Levante David, they're going to make it tough for Roshan Johnson and Khalil Herbert to do much between the tackles. Vita Vea clogging up the center as well. They got a great safety duo in Ryan Neal and Antoine Winfield Jr. I mean, really the weakness, if you can find one on this very good Tampa Bay defense, is in their cornerbacks. And I think that DJ Moore just absolutely has to step up. So as I mentioned, I think a priority focus this week is going to be getting the ball in DJ Moore's hands. And I think that this matchup, a defense that DJ Moore is familiar with, presents a pretty good opportunity for them to get right.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are overreacting to week 1, as we've seen. And Dave, you make a great argument.
Week 1, who would ever?
Never,
do
never.
That. No, we're also level-headed and measured. We never overreact to anything.
Logic. Hashtag. This is analytics, right? This is what we do.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, let's take a look at your first wide receiver start of the week. And I think that he did leave a few people disappointed last week because I think that a lot of people had some really high hopes for the Cleveland Browns this season. And while they came out with the win, not every piece of that offense was pretty. So talk to us about why Amari Cooper is one of your wide receiver starts of the week in week 2.
First of all, I would say that Deshaun Watson just didn't play well last week in terms of throwing the vertical ball. And I think a lot of that had to do with a little bit of the weather that may have been a factor. But I think that Cooper overall, one of the best route runners in the league, matches up well against pretty much any primary corner that you're going to deal with. I think that you're going to see more opportunities that are going to be heading his way, mainly because they're going to have to do a little bit more with play action passing. They're going to have to attack downfield against the Pittsburgh defense that is going to be aggressive with them in the run game to try and stop Nick Chubb. So, looking at that, looking at Cooper's consistency, usually over the course of past seasons, I'm not worried about week one. I saw him as a top 15 receiver heading into the season. I'm not going to change that because he had a bad week one predicated on weather and a quarterback who just wasn't throwing accurately in the vertical game.
Yeah, and Alfredo, I just took a peek at the show sheet, and I see who you're going to talk about. I think all three of our receivers that we're talking about here, we can just kind of sum up by saying, take a deep breath. It was only week one. Don't overreact. Put these good players back in your starting lineups.
Yep. I think that's the theme here, too. I'm going with Tyler Lockett against the Detroit Lions, and I really like this Lions-Seahawks game. I think it can give you a lot of fantasy points. Let's not let 1 week just make us throw away everything Tyler Lockett has done over his career, okay? He did leave the game with injury. The Seahawks offense as a whole struggled. I think that this was one of those weird outlier performances. Week one games, we know, they tend to be really hit or miss. The Rams, this was interesting to me. The Rams' time of possession was double that of the Seahawks in week one. 40 minutes time of possession for the Rams, just 20 for the Seahawks. I think that with the offensive line injuries that the Seahawks are having here, specifically at the tackle positions, Gino's going to be wanting to get this ball out quick. There's not going to be the times for the longer step drops and waiting for routes to develop and waiting for that deep ball. I think he's going to be getting rid of this ball pretty quick, and also just to get himself back into a rhythm. He did not look great in week one, so I do think this game lends to a pass-heavy game script. I think we can all just chill out for a sec. Okay, last season, the Detroit Lions allowed the fourth most fantasy points to wide receivers. Tyler Lockett's still very good, and I know there's probably going to be Lions fans in the comments that we're a lot better this year on defense. Sure, they improved a little bit, but we're also like a couple of Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore drops away from that secondary still not looking very good. So I think all these things just need context. If you have Tyler Lockett on your team, I think you could still start him with confidence this week.
You're preaching to the choir with me and Matt here. I know, Matt, you're a big Tyler Lockett fan. I've been singing Tyler Lockett's praises
He's just
for
good
years
at football,
and years.
Man.
You're preaching to the choir here. You're not going to get any pushback on starting Tyler Lockett from Matt or I.
Yeah, the only downfall is that they lost their two left tackles. So I would have even added Geno Smith to that equation. Other than the fact that if they can get decent tackle play, and they're using 41-year-old Jason Peters at left tackle, who is kind of a freak in the fact that he still can be called at age 41 insane. To play, right?
Yeah.
But
at 33, I don't want to get called to go play pickup basketball. So at 41 to get called to go start in an NFL game, hats off.
It was a miracle 2 years ago when Jason Peters was starting for the Chicago Bears, and now here he is 2 years later, still doing it.
Yeah, and he's going to be holding, and he's going to be doing some things that he needs to do to keep his quarterback upright. But he's not going to be unbelievably awful. And the fact, but they got to find a right tackle now too. So that's a big iffy thing. But Lockett's money.
All right, we got 3 more wide receiver starts of the week here. Dave, you're talking about a rookie that absolutely, he looked like the guy in week one for the Baltimore Ravens, and a lot of us were touting him in the offseason as a guy to draft for your fantasy teams. Zay Flowers is one of your wide receiver starts of the week for week 2.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. Zay Flowers looks like a legitimate wide receiver one. He had 10 targets, second highest target share in the league last week. 45% of the targets Baltimore threw went Zay Flowers' way. And I'm seeing this narrative out in social media where they're saying that we need to discredit what Zay Flowers did because the team was manufacturing him touches. Get out of here. They're manufacturing him touches because they want to get the ball in his hand. They're running screens. They're giving him jet sweeps. They want to get the ball in their best playmaker's hands. That is a crazy narrative to me.
It should be the opposite. If a team is willing to manufacture touches for a player, that's a good sign.
People have this like targets are earned mindset, and they're saying he didn't earn those targets. He earned them by getting plays schemed up to get him the ball. How is that not earning a target?
Yeah. If we're going to have the argument about what makes a primary receiver versus a guy who can win those one-on-one matchups and what makes him a top 15 receiver, maybe in fantasy leagues historically, yes, that might be the question. But if you're talking about someone who's going to score you points and win, even the top guys get schemed plays manufactured in their direction. So if we're talking the difference between Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis, sure.
Yeah.
But Gabriel Davis is still going to get you points. So you're just that's the expectation, and that's nutty. And Zay Flowers, anyway. I mean, he was number 2 receiver in the rookie scouting portfolio, ranked last year. Not surprised at all that he started off on fire.
Yeah, and again, I said I'm not going to spend too much time on this. That's it. Start Zay Flowers. I mean, he belongs in your top 24 wide receiver for me this year. He looks fantastic. We got the Matt Waldman stamp of approval on it as well. Fire up your Zay Flowers. Hopefully you can just steady rely on this guy for the rest of the season.
We made you spend more time on this because
we wanted to beat the dead horse. Yeah.
Yes. All right,
can ball.
Matt.
That's how I just sum it up. Zay Flowers can ball.
# he knows ball. All right, Matt, you're talking about another wide receiver who I think one of the arguments here is that he also had schemed touches. His quarterback has said he still has confidence in him. However, I think that 99.9% of the fantasy community will not have confidence in him. So tell everybody, plead your case as to why Kadarius Toney is still worth a start here in week 2.
Alfredo, I didn't plead in anything. I got the cojones to start this guy. I'm not pleading anything. If you don't want to start him, you go ahead and don't start him. I'm going to go ahead and get points because I look at it this way. People are afraid of Kadarius Toney because he's shown signs of immaturity. He's been injured often. And he dropped a lot of balls, and it justified their narrative that he's immature, he gets injured often, and let's add on some other reason. Let's manufacture a reason. Manufacture touches. Let's manufacture some reasons here, which is that he doesn't know how to catch a football. Well, look, the truth is the Cowboys game from 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of what his game can be is what he did against the Cowboys as an outside receiver. He can be a primary receiver in the league. Are the injuries a legit thing? Sure they are. Is the immaturity a legit concern? Absolutely. Is it all going to crop up tomorrow and explode in our faces like Antonio Brown in his final game? Maybe. It might happen.
A shot.
But there was also a number of years with Antonio Brown where you would have given basically, half of your bench and a couple of good starters and some draft picks to have him. And I look at Kadarius Toney and the mistakes he made relative to the mistakes that Sky Moore made. Sky Moore made mistakes with routes, with route timing, with route depth, with some conceptual things about being available for where the ball was going to be. In contrast, Toney's timing wasn't off. It was the fact that he had Richie James run in front of him on a mesh route that James was the one at fault there. There was some, he had a drop and then things cascaded, and he hadn't had practice with Mahomes. So it was a factor of, missing a lot of time and getting back into it. He does not catch the ball like that on a normal basis. So for me, I look at Jacksonville, and look at that defense and look at who's going to get the targets, who had the mistakes that are the most correctable. And I think Toney is the obvious play here. So I'm going to roll the dice with him until it's blatantly obvious that it's not going to work out. And I'm okay with people telling me, oh, that's crazy. I don't care. That's stupid. He's a bum. Whatever they want to say, that's okay, because that's why I do what I do. And that's why you're here asking me about, who I'm starting on a team, not whether you're doing it or not, So if you have that same feeling or faith in Toney and you're wrong, lesson learned. You move forward with somebody else. But he's a good player who just had a bad week. Move on. Take the chance. Don't look at yourself and slap your forehead like next Tuesday morning when he has, 120 and 2 touchdowns off of like 6 targets,
So I talked about Toney in our waiver wire show earlier in the week, and I said, you can get him out for free right now because a lot of people are just going to cut him from their fantasy rosters, and you can pick him up for free. I recommend doing that. I wanted to talk about him as a start of the week, but he was one of my start of the weeks last year. And Matt, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter. I had over 5 million impressions on a tweet about starting Kadarius Toney because as soon as the game happened and he had that game, I was just getting lit up by everybody on Twitter. So I'm glad you had the cojones to recommend him this week because I completely agree with everything you're saying. Last thing I'll say, Matt, you'll get a kick out of this. I recommended Kadarius Toney as a start on Thursday. We all saw what happened on Thursday night. I went to bed and I had a dream that Joe Bryant flew me to Nashville and made me work in front of a jugs machine for recommending Kadarius Toney. I literally had a dream that I was in Joe Bryant's backyard working in front of a jugs machine. Some weird, psychological thing for recommending Toney.
If he were to do it, if he had an evil streak, he would probably put you out on the lake on like on a bar, on one of the mini barges out there. Yep. And he would have Julia shooting the jug machine out there with that from her kayak, So,
oh man, yeah, it was a rough recommendation, but I'm going back to the well. I'm starting Kadarius Toney this week for all the reasons you said.
You just, again, are you playing your fantasy football team for the approval of people on social media? Are you playing, or your league mates? Or are you playing your fantasy football team to become better and to win? And if you don't win this year and I'll just make this point. The best lessons you learn are from mistakes you make. And the best mistakes that you should try to make are the ones that you believe in and not worry about what other people think about, because they're the ones that are going to be most valuable to you. And it's going to make you better in the future. And then when everybody's looking at you and go, that was crazy that you made that call. And I can't believe that was an unbelievable call. Nobody made that call. It's because you had the cojones to make the bad calls too. But I don't think none of us think the bad calls are actually bad calls when we make them. And I don't think that with Toney right now.
Completely agree.
I'm really happy that Matt pronounced cojones correctly after Dave. You dropped a cojones.
Cojones, yeah, that's
Come on, man. La palabra es cojones.
Sí.
Give you a quick Spanish lesson.
Claro, yeah.
Claro que sí.
I'm sorry, I failed Spanish class in high school.
I was one credit shy of a Spanish major, but I didn't get enough sleep. I was living with someone who I was in love with, and I did not look at the other's page of every test, everything on the final, and so my linguistics course I failed, and so I ended up one credit shy of a double major with Spanish. But I don't
actually
remember
failed Spanish my freshman year. So for my next 3 years, I studied Latin, which isn't a spoken language. So that's why my mispronunciation is okay, because nobody speaks Latin anymore.
See, good excuse. There we go.
Cuban family over here. If I can't say the word cojones, I'm not invited.
No,
that's it. All right, let's get to the last wide receiver start of the week here. And I've got Nico Collins going up against the Indianapolis Colts. He was really good in week 1. I think he was better than most people thought. He was the lead wide receiver for this team, 11 targets, a 26% target share, and one of only 9 wide receivers in the league to see more than 10 targets in week 1. He was, and this is actually, I think, even more important than just like looking at the targets, is that he was consistently the first read for CJ Stroud. And that's the thing that you often see with rookie quarterbacks. I keep preaching this, is they want to find the guy that makes them comfortable. And if he is consistently the first read, whether that's something that's being schemed or that is his preference, that is a good sign for Nico Collins going forward. And Stroud looked good. I think he's going to be better than people think. This Texans offense is going to be a bit more competitive than people think. Going up against the Colts here that just got torched by Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones in week 1, I think Nico Collins is becoming one of those set it and forget it wide receiver 3s or a flex with some good touchdown upside. Now, before we keep going, we're sending this over to the audio version of the show. And we've got some new secret weapons here at the tight end position. The tight end position is changing, boys and girls. And I think that we are starting to see a wave. You know what? That's it. I'm not even going to tell you anymore. I don't want to give too much away. Head on over to the audio version of this show, and you're going to get the full version of it. And to get that, you just click the link in the description down below, or you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts on Apple or Spotify. This has been our week 2 starts of the week. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt Waldman. We'll see you next time.